What happens when the United States picks a fight it can't win? The United States thought it could pressure Canada into submission with aggressive tariffs, but instead, it has triggered an economic backlash that is spiraling out of control. In response to U.S. trade restrictions, Canada has unleashed a $155 billion counterattack, crippling key American industries and putting hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs at risk. But there is more to come. Now factories are shutting down, prices are rising, and economic panic is spreading. But this isn't just about trade. This could be a turning point in North America's balance of power. As U.S. states suffer the consequences, could this economic war spark deeper divisions within America itself? Is Washington losing its grip? And is Canada proving that the era of unquestioned U.S. dominance is finally over? Let's find out. On February 1st, 2025, the United States imposed tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods under the pretext of addressing border security and drug trafficking concerns. However, this was more than just a policy decision. It was an economic attack designed to put pressure on Canada's economy. The tariffs applied to most Canadian exports except for oil and energy, which were subjected to lower rates. The U.S. government likely expected that Canada would take the hit without significant retaliation, but that assumption quickly proved to be wrong. Just days later, Canada responded forcefully, announcing a massive $155 billion tariff package against U.S. goods. The retaliation was immediate and effective. The first phase of Canadian tariffs, worth $30 billion, was implemented right away, targeting major U.S. exports to Canada. The Canadian government made it clear that it was willing to escalate further, planning an additional $125 billion in tariffs to follow. Unlike the broad, unfocused U.S. tariffs, Canada's countermeasures were highly strategic. The government specifically targeted industries that are crucial to the U.S. economy and politically significant to the current administration. Canada was not just responding, it was making sure that the economic pain was felt exactly where it would have the greatest impact. Despite Canada's aggressive response, the economic damage caused by U.S. tariffs was unavoidable. Canada suffered an estimated $2.1 billion economic loss due to these trade barriers. Additionally, reports from different sources indicated that many Canadian jobs had been lost across various industries affected by the new restrictions. The hardest hit sectors were automotive, agriculture, and technology, all of which rely heavily on cross-border supply chains. The automotive industry, in particular, faced serious setbacks as manufacturers struggled to deal with new costs and logistical delays. However, while Canada was taking losses, it was clear that the U.S. was facing even bigger problems. The retaliation from Canada began to take a serious toll on the American economy, proving that trade wars are never a one-sided battle. With supply chains disrupted and key industries struggling, the U.S. was now experiencing the full force of Canada's countermeasures. Canada's response to the U.S. tariffs was not just about imposing taxes on imported goods. It was a full-scale economic counteroffensive aimed at striking the American economy where it would hurt the most. And if you think Canada's $155 billion worth of tariffs was all, then you are wrong. Canada didn't stop there. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. Let's continue. Now, in a major escalation, Canadian leaders called on their citizens to boycott travel to the United States, an action that has already begun to devastate the U.S. tourism and hospitality sectors. According to Forbes, the U.S. Travel Association, USTA, issued a warning that the Canadian travel boycott could result in $2.1 billion in lost revenue for the U.S. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau directly urged citizens in a televised speech to reconsider their trips to the U.S. and explore Canada instead. This call to action was further reinforced by David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, who emphasized that Canadians should really be thinking carefully about spending their money in that country, since the U.S. is actively trying to harm Canada's economy. The effects of this travel boycott were immediate. Flight Centre, Canada's largest travel agency, reported a surge in cancellations for U.S. vacations, with many customers instead rebooking luxury travel elsewhere. The biggest losses are expected in Florida, California, Nevada, New York, and Texas, the most visited states by Canadian tourists. In Florida alone, Canadians made up 38% of all foreign visitors in 2023, a number that is now set to plummet due to the boycott. Texas, where Canadian travelers contributed $433 million in spending in 2023, is also bracing for a sharp decline in tourism revenue. According to USA data, even a 10% drop in Canadian travel to the U.S. could result in 2 million fewer visits, putting 140,000 American jobs in the hospitality and tourism industries at risk. The National Travel and Tourism Office highlighted the massive economic impact of Canadian visitors, noting that 20.4 million Canadians spent $2.5 billion in the U.S. last year, the highest from any single foreign country. The travel boycott is now threatening to erase a large portion of that revenue. Trudeau further reinforced the call for economic patriotism, telling Canadians now is the time to choose Canada. It might mean changing your summer vacation plans to stay here in Canada and explore the many national and provincial parks, historical sites, and tourist destinations our great country has to offer. With tourism losses piling up, industries collapsing, and hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk, the U.S. is now facing the full force of Canada's economic retaliation. What started as a simple tariff war has now turned into a deep economic crisis that could have long-term consequences for America's struggling industries. Canada is proving that economic warfare is not one-sided, and the U.S. is paying the price. So the U.S. may have initiated the trade war, but it soon became evident that it was paying just as high a price, if not a greater one, than Canada. A study by the Brookings Institution projected that over 400,000 American jobs could be lost due to Canada and Mexico's retaliation. Industries that relied heavily on exports to Canada, including automotive, agriculture, and alcohol production, were being hit hard. According to ABC News, American manufacturers were already facing serious problems, struggling with increased costs for raw materials, production slowdowns, and disrupted supply chains. The rising cost of doing business meant that companies had to make difficult choices, leading to layoffs and reduced investment in expansion. Consumers in the U.S. were also beginning to feel the pain. The White House fact sheet acknowledged that consumer prices had begun to rise as a result of the tariffs. Imported goods that once flowed easily across the border were now subject to higher costs, which businesses inevitably passed on to customers. Everything from grocery store prices to car dealerships was being affected. What was originally meant to pressure Canada into economic submission was now backfiring, putting the U.S. economy under serious strain. The United States entered this trade war believing that it could dictate the terms of economic engagement, but instead of forcing Canada into submission, it has found itself locked in a costly battle that is hurting its economy. With 400,000 American jobs at risk, rising consumer prices, and major industries struggling, the U.S. is now experiencing the unintended consequences of its aggressive policies. Meanwhile, Canada is not only defending itself, but also setting the foundation for long-term economic resilience. The outcome of this dispute is clear. Canada has shown that it will not be bullied into economic submission. By striking back with precision, diversifying its trade, and strengthening its domestic industries, Canada is making sure that the U.S. pays a heavy price for initiating this conflict. What was meant to be an economic power move by the U.S. has turned into a crisis for American businesses and workers. The lesson is undeniable. When Canada is pushed, it pushes back. And this time, the United States is the one feeling the pain. The mounting economic damage caused by Canada's retaliation might force Donald Trump to rethink his aggressive trade policies. With billions in losses, industry struggling, and hundreds of thousands of American jobs at risk, the political pressure on the White House is growing. Republican leaders in key states, especially Florida, Texas, and New York, are already facing backlash from businesses suffering due to Canada's countermeasures. If Trump's tariffs continue to backfire, he may be forced to reconsider his stance or risk economic and political fallout that could damage his presidency. Do you think Canada is doing the right thing? Should Trump rethink his approach to Canada? Let us know in the comments section. Will this force Trump